Do you know that baby? Do you know that baby with the big eyes? Anyway, it's important to vote. The United States Constitution did not originally define who was eligible to vote, allowing each state to determine who was eligible. But there was the Jim Crow laws, the black laws, the literacy test, the poll tax, the religious test, where some of the states and local laws used various parts to deny non-white citizens, Native Americans, and other locally they called undesirable groups from exercising voting rights granted under the Constitution. Because of such state and local discriminatory practices, over time the federal role in elections has increased through amendments to the Constitution and enacted legislation. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a landmark for federal legislation in the United States that prohibits racial discrimination in voting. It was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson during the height of the Civil Rights Movement, which is supposedly August 6, 1965. And then Congress later amended the Act 5 times to expand the protection because it wasn't protected. And it was designed to enforce the voting rights guaranteed by the 14th and 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The act secured voting rights for racial minorities throughout the country, especially in the South, because even though it was passed, they still weren't allowed to do it. So the U.S. Department of Justice came into play. And then finally they were allowing people to vote. But the reason why voting is so important, because it allows you to make decisions indirectly. That's why certain people are always trying to prohibit people from voting by putting obstacles and propaganda out there to keep you from voting. Because if you have issues at the local level, that's why you must vote for the mayor and the issues. Mayors control the police, so if it's not safe, it's your mayor's fault. The governors are elected also, and they're in charge of the mayors. So, if you have problems with both of them, you contact your attorney general, which is either elected or appointed by the governor who's in charge at the state level. Right now, there's 43 states that elect attorney generals, and there are 7 that select the governors. When none of those help, you write your congressman because they're elected. The governor is also responsible for implementing the state laws and budgets, in charge of the state's national guards, the highway patrol, his political party, and he is the one who goes to Washington to represent your state. The sheriff are elected, and they're in charge of the criminals, courts, and jail system. Okay, so to explain the electoral vote, each state gets 2 senators. Because there are 50 states, we have 100 senators. And the rest of the electoral votes are based on how many elected officials, which are the House of Representatives, each state sends to Washington. And that's based on the state's population. Each state is divided into districts on their population. Right now, it's based on 693,000 get 1 district, or per 690,000. There are 435 members of the House. Each of them represent a vote for the U.S. President, and there's a total of 538 electoral votes. Now, you're probably wondering where the extra 3 votes come from. Well, you have Washington, D.C. They get 3 electoral votes because by a separate law, because they are not a state. They are a corporation that helps rule over the United States. The senators are a part of the government that make laws and vote on laws. The House and the senators vote to pass the bill that makes it a law. The vice president is in charge of the senators because he might have to break ties between the House and the Senate on bills. A side note, you have Hawaii that has 4 electoral votes, where you have Ohio that has 20. So if you don't vote, you will not know what's going on in your city, district, state, and what you've been charged with. Here's an example. So if you're not voting, you don't know that there's a law in Ironton, Ohio that says cross-dressing is against the law. Or there's a law in Cincinnati where anal intercourse is banned. Or if you run out of gas in Youngstown, a policeman may bite a dog to quiet him. That's impounding. And the running out of gas is in Youngstown. It is against the law to roller skate without notifying the police in North Canton. But see, unless you voted, you wouldn't know about these laws. And then there's many others. That's just some samples. So if you don't vote, you won't know what the laws are, or what they're adding, or what they're amending. Sometimes you're just voting on your district issues, city issues, and state issues. And then when you vote in the federal election, you're basically voting for your House of Representatives and your senators, because they are the one that voted in a major election for the president. Now, they do have the popular vote. They just do that so you can see who would win without the electoral vote. That's all I've been able to get from it. So you can't get mad at the president of the United States because he's in charge of the Army, Navy, and the militia. So if he's in charge of that, he's going to put the most money towards that if he can. But he is in charge of the budget. He has to make a budget. But he wants to increase the budget so it favors what he's over. He can enforce the laws passed by Congress, but Congress is in the House of Representatives, and the Senate, they have to pass it too. Now, what the president can do, he can give pardons, make treaties, and select people to help run the government. But it takes the House and the Representatives to do most of the laws. The president is basically in charge of the Army, Navy, militia, military. The local level is up to you and the people you elect by voting. That has to make a difference that affects you directly. That's why it's imperative to vote. So if you're not voting, others are making decisions about your life. If you say it doesn't affect you, then we'll do what they want to do anyway, because the reason they're allowed to do it is because you're not voting, so they've taken your vote. So why give someone else your power to vote by not voting? A lot of people were killed for voting because they wanted to know, at least have some type of say-so in what was going on.